This is the University of Otago.
Hello, good evening. My name is Harlene Hain, and I have the great pleasure of being the Vice Chancellor here at the University of Otago. And it is fantastic to see so many people who have come in from the beautiful sunshine outside to share in the celebration of Jamin Halberstadt's inaugural professorial lecture. I would like to warmly welcome both academic and general staff who have come here, this afternoon, as well as members of the general public. And I would also like to extend a very warm welcome to members of Jamin's family, his wife Cindy, who has for the last 20-some years been his harshest critic and his fiercest ally in both his science and his life, and his two brilliant children, Abby and Paxton. It's great to have you both here with us this evening. Now, they say that all great things come in threes, and this evening we get to celebrate the third inaugural professorial lecture from the psychology department for this year. And like the two inaugural professorial lectures that came before Jamin's, both Professor Elaine Rees and Professor Liz Franz, Jamin, again, has very, very, very warmly earned the honor of becoming a professor. Now, I think I was going to say I've possibly come the farthest for this lecture, but I see that Jonathan is here, and maybe he has come even farther. But I just came from Toronto this morning in order to be here. So I took a 30-hour plane trip in order to be here on time for Jamin's professorial. And as I was flying on the plane, I thought, what can I say about someone who I have known for over 2 decades, and what would I be able to deliver in my jet-lagged state? But while I was thinking on the plane, one of the things I was reminded of is that I have the great pleasure of reading all of the professorial promotion materials for all of the professors in the university. And I seem to recall that when Jamin's promotion package came forward, that his letters were particularly laudatory. So I thought that rather than relying on my own words this evening, I would go back and look at some of those letters of recommendation and see whether or not I had in fact created a false memory, or whether those letters were in fact as strong as I recalled. So I had a great time this afternoon, Jamin, actually reviewing your promotion materials. And my memory was not false. In fact, all of Jamin's letters from internationally recognized experts in his field were extraordinarily complimentary of Jamin's work. And I thought, just by way of example, I would share with you one little snippet from one of those letters, but it certainly exemplifies the sentiment from all of them. This is what your referee had to say, Jamin. I view Jamin Halberstadt as the complete academic package, a gifted and productive researcher, a highly original thinker and innovative methodologist, an outstanding graduate mentor and supervisor, and a superb citizen and contributor to the department, university, and the discipline. So I think that statement aptly summarizes why we are here tonight celebrating Jamin's promotion to professor, because he truly is the whole academic package. I would now like to hand over to the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Sciences, Professor Keith Hunter, who will tell us just a little bit more about Jamin's path to professor.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor. And as with the Vice Chancellor, this is one of the most pleasurable parts of my job. I think this year I've had the pleasure of introducing 10 professors in the Division of Sciences who've been promoted this year, and that's a great privilege. Jamin was born in New York City, but he grew up from the age of 2 in Wilmington, Delaware, and he went to get a BA honours degree at Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, which he completed in 1989. And then he went to work for a while at the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences in Maryland, where his job was to administer cocaine to squirrel monkeys. So that's the genesis of his career in psychology. He then went to Indiana University and obtained his PhD in 1996, and came soon after that to his appointment at the University of Otago. Jamin's research interests are fairly eclectic, and they include a variety of topics in decision-making, emotion, facial attractiveness, and social categorisation. And the Vice-Chancellor mentioned his methodological work. So recently he's well known for partnering with Animation Research Limited and filming groups of students, forming groups in Forsyth Bar Stadium by filming from the roof, which I think sounds pretty innovative. Jamin has been awarded the New Zealand Association of Scientists Research Medal and the university's Carl Smith Medal. Now, regular attendees at these lectures know that I ask the candidates for an interesting anecdote about their life, and this is the first time I've had one that you would call a crime mystery. It's called The Case of the Stolen Beard. So in Jamin's Psych 202 class, he has a habit of calling for suggestions and comments from students, which they place in a little box somewhere on the lectern, and he reads those and then attempts to answer or deal with these comments at the next lecture. And one of the comments he received was from a student who said, "I love your beard." Now, as it turned out, this was beard trimming evening, so Jamin took some of the beard trimmings and put them in a little glossy bag and announced at the lecture that it was available for the student who said that she enjoyed his beard. But the creepy thing is that when he got to the end of the lecture to give her the glossy bag of beard, someone had stolen it. And who knows, the person who did that might well be in this room. So, all joking aside, my congratulations, Jamin, on your thoroughly deserved promotion to Professor, and I now invite you to present your inaugural lecture.
Thank you, Keith, for that embarrassing yet humanizing anecdote. I can't imagine how you come up with these anecdotes all the time. So I've been to a few of these myself, and actually I noticed no one has given any anecdotes about you. So, well, I don't want to take time now, but you should, well, do you remember the time we were doing, we were doing the vodka shots, right? And there was the circus clown, you know, and the doctor said, you know, I can't imagine how you got a bite on that part of your body. It just was. Anyway, I'm not going to go into it, but definitely you got to ask him because he's totally crazy. Right. Seriously though, I really want to thank you, Keith and Vern and Richard and Kate Berard, all the people from the Division of Science. There's Kate Berard. Hi. From the Division of Sciences who have believed in me all these years. I don't think you mentioned, I just got my first Marsden grant, which is great, and I'm very grateful to the Marsden Foundation for that. However, it came after many Marsden grant applications. And through all that time, somehow the university did not see that as failure, but as promise. So all that time, they've been funding my research and my work, and I think maybe the best thing about getting the Marsden is really to sort of pay back some of that goodwill that I've been borrowing all these years. So thanks for your support of me all this time. Harleen, I want to give special thanks to you. Thank you for coming back early or on time, I don't know. Making it back for my talk. Harleen, I'm not sure if you remember this, but Harleen's the first person that I met at the university. It wasn't actually at the university. I was on my way to the job talk, 1996. Do you remember this? We were in LAX. If you spent any time in LAX, you know, after a couple hours, you're ready to gouge your eye out with a spoon. But Harleen was there and somehow knew who I was and said just the right thing then, and she's kind of been saying just the right thing for the past 18 years or so. So I really hope that you will remain the Vice Chancellor forever. Thank you. And the university is just one player in my success. So I'm not under any illusions that I'm the only one responsible for my success. In fact, probably the person least responsible for my success. I want to especially need to thank a few people before I get started on the shipping news. Most of all, I want to thank my family, my wife, Cindy Hall. It was 1990. I was injecting monkeys with cocaine. Cindy was irradiating rats at the National Institute of Health. And so it was sort of romance was inevitable. Anyway, so ever since we've been supporting each other and each other's careers, and I think probably she's done more of the supporting than I have. So for the record, I do want to give Cindy credit. She's a brilliant clinical psychologist that gets sort of almost no recognition for the work that she does. She has a spookily accurate intuition that really complements my own compromised social skills. And she's a great mother, and actually kind of a solo mother sometimes to our two great kids, Abigail and Paxton. So I love you, and thanks all you guys for supporting me. Would not have done it or wanted to do any of this without you. So Cindy and I, there's no doubt about it, we lived a charmed life in New Zealand. We been here, I think 18 or 19 years. And we have a great house, friends, great careers. A lot of this would not be possible without the people in the psychology department, and I want to mention, so you can see how happy we are in the psychology department. I wanted to sort of thank everybody, and I actually started going through the photo and to say like, oh, this person did this, and this person did this. And then on the first run through the talk, I was all the way at the end of the talk already, and I hadn't even spoken of anything, so I'm afraid I'm really sorry. I'm just gonna have to say thanks to everybody. I will come around, if I haven't already, I'll come around to you individually to say all the things you've done, tell you all the things you've done for us, and to thank you for that. There's a couple people I did want to mention. I heard that did you say Louis is here? Louis? Yeah, he's here. Where? Yeah. Louis, hi. I haven't seen. No, I didn't see you. Anyway, thanks a lot for coming. I haven't seen Louis for probably a year already. So really glad you were able to make it. And the other person I just really wanted to single out was Jeff White. Jeff met me at the airport. He was the HOD at the time when I was hired. He met me at the airport. He helped us find a house. He's attended our wedding. He actually attended my mother's wedding, I'm pretty sure, also. Was he not there? Yeah. Yeah, no, well, my mother was married here at our house. Well, I'm not sure what's funny about that. But, anyway, so Jeff, and then since all these years, Jeff's been just a great friend and mentor and benefactor, and as you see him here, he's sort of always in the background. I secretly think he's always responsible for my success. So thanks a lot, Jeff, and don't retire too fully, please. I wasn't always at the University of Otago. I had a life before that, and an academic life before that. I just want to mention briefly a couple people who were influential. Barry Schwartz was my advisor at Swarthmore College, and his book, The Battle for Human Nature, and his work on economics and decision-making inspired my interest in philosophy and psychology. I was actually a philosophy major at Swarthmore, and still resonates a lot in my work today. Paula Niedenthal was my advisor, graduate advisor at Indiana University, and she taught me everything I needed to know to succeed in the world of international social psychology. Now, is Elaine here? I just saw her. Yes, Elaine, I got this idea from you. Thank you. I wanted to trace back my intellectual roots, and turned out to be a little more complicated than I realized. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I found some. I was really amazed, humbled, really, to see like the connections I had. I only have sort of 6 people back to the great William James, Wilhelm Wundt, who is really the first psychologist. Kurt Lewin, who is considered the father of social psychology. And this is the greatest part. I discovered another father in here, my father, turns out to be, I did not know this, but he was a student of Dan Katz at the University of Michigan in 1961. I asked him about this. He said his thesis was worker valence in industrial job situations. So he said he was so dispirited after doing this that he gave up on psychology, and he pursued a degree in law at Columbia University, where he eventually met my mother, Vivian Silverman, at Columbia's sister school, Barnard College, and ultimately leading to my appearance before you today. So, were it not for Katz's poor supervision of my father, I would not. Now, I've also have my own students now. I've been really privileged to mentor a number of great students. I'm proud to say that all of them are working in academics, I guess it's fair to say, in one form or another. Kumari, I'm not sure if Kumari's here, but is Kumari here? Okay, there. Hi, so Kumari is one of my earlier students. She's right now a senior lecturer in our own Department of Psychological Medicine, and she's been co-supervising with me. She co-supervised Azra with me. Is Azra here? Ah. Oh, wow, this is really great for you all to come. So Azra, I've got to mention because she is the only student I've ever had who is working on her thesis actually while giving birth to a baby. So it's literally, there's like, analysis of variance on this page, like list of contractions on the side. So it was, and unfortunately, well, I guess fortunately, but unfortunately for the thesis, the baby came a little early. He was born, I don't know, 4 days ago. So anyway, but I'm confident that she'll finish up the thesis after that. Oh, thanks for coming. So each of these students, they've been students, but they've also been ultimately collaborators, really, and they've shaped my own thinking and research trajectory. And Jonathan Zhang, who's here, as Harleen mentioned, came out from, he's at Oxford now. Probably the best example in this regard because he's really shaped a lot of my thinking and sort of led me to a lot of my research toward issues of religious cognition and death anxiety and rituals. Actually, it's John and a former postdoc, Matthias Blumke, who is at Heidelberg. We are co-PIs on the Marsden project, which looks at the relationship between death, anxiety, and religious belief. And then finally, I just want to mention the rest of my lab. It's really, there's a bit more students here than I've ever had in the past. It's a really great group. We've been running really hot in the lab. We've had dozens and dozens of research on all sorts of things, social psychology related. So in addition to the religion and ritual stuff, which we do a lot of, we do study emotion. We study risk perception, social networks, moral cognition, perception of truth and beauty, face perception, stereotypes, bias. And I want to just thank everyone for making my work so enjoyable. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where you all take me next. So unfortunately, I'm not going to talk about any of those things today. Instead, I'm going to just focus on one aspect of my work, which I call the shipping news. No, it's not Annie Proulx's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel about new life and love in Newfoundland. It's the shipping news. That's right. What's wrong? Are you not hip? To ship means to support or endorse a pairing of two individuals that is not canon in the works in which they appear. It's tween for relationship. Isn't that right, Abby? So for example, if you wanted to take the old Captain Kirk and the new Captain Kirk, right, you could create a new kind of combination of Captain Kirks. That would be a ship of Captain Kirks, right? So that is the hip way of saying relationship, and I am definitely hip. Right, so some other ships you might be familiar with. Brangelina, right? Bushama. And Harkeith Hain Nunter, anyway. I think, yeah. Actually, I think that guy was in Hairspray. Right, so they're a little weird. I mean, some of them are a little weird photographs. But the reason that they're weird is actually tells you something really profound, or at least interesting, about face perception and the interaction between emotion and cognition. That's what I'll eventually get back to in the time I have. But to take a step back, they are weird, but the fact that they're weird is really an exception, really, to the rule. And the rule being that when you take two faces and you blend them together, right, the result you get is a face that is generally more attractive than either of the faces, the original faces from which it was created. Right? And furthermore, as you add faces to the composite, the face gets increasingly more attractive until you eventually asymptote in attractiveness. Whoops, one more here. Right, so they gradually get more attractive. And you can see what's happening. It's nothing like miraculous. It's just that the faces are losing all of their distinctive characteristics, and you're left with this sort of blander, but yet somehow more attractive individual person. Someone whose face is more face-like than the originals, but yet more attractive. Now, you can do this, so there's a relationship between the averaging of two faces and its attractiveness. And you can do this in other ways as well. You can ask people to rate how face-like a person's face is, and you can get independent people to judge how attractive the individuals are. So in this case, this is actually originally a group of 50 individual women. So the most attractive person is down there on the left, and the person judged least attractive is on the right. And an independent group of people judged these two also to be among the most attractive one was among the most, had the most face-like face, most typical, average-looking face. And the least attractive woman was among those who had the least typical faces. And the correlation, for those of you keeping score, was about 0.7 between judged averageness and judged attractiveness. So about half of the variance in facial attractiveness of these women was accounted for by how typical the person's face was. You can also do this within an individual. These are brand new, not brand new, they're new data. I've never shown them before. John collected these as a third-year student. I've never shown them anywhere before, but in honor of his visiting, I was going to show you that you can ask people to find the most attractive Paul McCartney, who turns out to be 1963 McCartney, and the least attractive McCartney, which turns out to be 1997 McCartney. Right? And again, the correlation here is only about 0.4, so it's not as strong, but yet there is a significant relationship between how good an example McCartney is, these McCartney photos are of McCartney, and how attractive people find an individual image of McCartney. John Lennon, infamously, I guess, said that the Beatles were more famous than Jesus. However, it's Jesus who has a stronger relationship, though, between averageness and attractiveness. So it turns out that if you ask people to rate photos of Jesus on terms of how attractive he is, I feel I may have ventured into dangerous waters. So anyway, the 60s kind of Barry Gibb Jesus is the most judged to be the most attractive, and the sort of 10th century Jesus is the least attractive. And the correlation between Jesus, how typical of an image Jesus is and how appealing people find the image is about 0.8 in Jesus photos. I'm not the first person to play around with morphing and averaging faces. That is usually attributed to Francis Galton. Francis Galton was Darwin's half cousin or second cousin or something. Apparently they shared a grandfather, Erasmus. Now, Galton wasn't much in the beard department. However, he did have incredible sideburns, I have to say. Galton was 22 when his father died and left him a fortune, and he gave up a career in medicine to live a life of leisure. And at that time, it was a time when you could pretty much know everything there was to know, and that's what Galton did. And he also also extended knowledge in all sorts of domains. It's really remarkable how many scientific domains he contributed to. He's credited with the invention of the questionnaire, the nature-nurture debate, the sciences of fingerprinting and meteorology, the standard deviation, the electrocardiogram, dog whistle, like goes on and on, all the stuff that he's done. Well, among those things, he invented a way of combining images to create composite photographs. Here's some of his work. Right now, what he was really interested in was to determine if certain behavioral traits were associated with certain physical characteristics. This is the science, in quotes now, of eugenics, which is another one of Galton's creations. I think the idea is that if a particular behavior, say in this case larceny without violence, is associated with a particular trait, then if you get people who have committed these offenses and you average them all together, what should come out is that particular trait. And then once you can identify what that trait is, you might be able to selectively breed that trait out of the population and thereby get rid of larceny without violence. As you can probably imagine the end of the story, he didn't manage to find that particular trait. One thing he did notice, though, was sort of counterintuitively, as he combined these faces together, they became more and more attractive. This is what Galton says: the special villainous irregularities in the individuals have disappeared, and the common humanity that underlies them has prevailed. They represent not the criminal, but the man who is liable to fall into crime. Right, so he sees this, that as you combine these people, whatever their particular negative traits or characteristics actually all fall away, and sort of the innate, beautiful core comes forward. So nowadays, you can do this, of course, with digital imaging. In 24 free apps on the computer, you can morph anyone you want with anyone else. And a lot of people do this, and there's a lot of discussion. Some people, artists do this. Philosophers have something to say about this. Futurists have something to say about this. This is artist Mike, guy who's so great that you have to say his name twice. Anyway, what he did was take photographs of people in different cities, supposedly randomly chosen off the street, and he averaged them together. As you can see, the attractiveness effect emerging clearly here. The resulting images are attractive people. He calls this the face of tomorrow. So it seems like the face of today, because he took the photos today. But anyway. It's the face of tomorrow, and so artists have things to say about the attractiveness but so do psychologists and researchers, and this has been a big deal in evolutionary psychology, especially because evolutionary psychologists, whenever attractiveness is at stake, evolutionary psychologists weigh in. They ask what would be the function of being attracted to someone who has a relatively average face? And some of the answers have been, averageness is a signal of some sort of sign of reproductive fitness, heterozygosity, variability, and genetic variability, resistance to disease, childhood health. There's actually some weak data on childhood health, apparently, that your averageness of your face as a child predicts weakly your health as an adult. I've always been sort of an evolutionary psychological skeptic. Not that I'm an evolutionary skeptic, but I've always been suspicious about how easy it is to spin an evolutionary psychological tale about why a particular phenomenon exists. And in this particular case, I have to say owls, right? And I say owls because there are owls on the overheads. But I also say owls because I have run the same study that I did with faces I showed you before with owls and a number of other stimuli. And what you find is the exact same phenomenon. So the most attractive owl and the least attractive owl turn out to be also the owls that people judge to be very typical of owls and very atypical of owls. And it's not related to owls or faces or anything. You do the same thing with human artifacts. Here's an old paper from Psychological Science where we compared the asked people to judge the attractiveness of wristwatches. The most attractive wristwatch and the least attractive wristwatch turn out to be the wristwatches that people believe are the best examples of wristwatches, and the worst examples of wristwatches, respectively. So it turns out that for horses and handguns, elephants, butterflies, literally almost every category that we've studied has this relationship that we call this the beauty and averageness effect, a term that I coined with one of my collaborators, Piotr Winkelmann. So this is a tendency to prefer category members that are better examples of their group. Okay, and besides discovering and naming this effect, we've been really interested in trying to explain it, not from an evolutionary perspective, because, of course, unless you have a very, warped mate preferences, it's not a very parsimonious explanation to say that you're attracted to, average things because they signal reproductive fitness. But from a cognitive perspective, what's the proximate mechanism that links averageness to attractiveness? So we call this a mediator. So something might be causally related to both averageness and attractiveness that explains the relationship between the two. And one particular mediator that we've been really interested in is what I call fluency. So fluency is the ease with which a stimulus can be perceived and or processed. So, for example, so I hold this up, I say, what is this? In the time it takes you to perceive that it's a glass, an empty glass, and to tell me it's an empty glass, that has some amount of time associated with it. That amount of time can be measured, and that is a combination of several processes, but overall that's your processing fluency for a glass. So the reason we focused on fluency, and the reason fluency is a good candidate to explain the beauty and averageness effect, is because on the one hand, category prototypes, things that are good examples of their group, are fluent. So these are paintings by Dunedin artist Tony Tarashevitz. So you may like or dislike Tony Tarashevitz's style, but he does have a style, right? And if you study his paintings for a little while and close your eyes, you can kind of imagine what that style, you can kind of imagine, what the prototypical Tony painting would be. And if I showed you new paintings, you'd be able to tell me how similar each of these new paintings is to that prototype Tony Tarashevitz painting. So if you plot those judgments, the typicality of a particular painting as a Tony Tarashevitz painting, and you plot that against the time that it's required for independent people to tell you that the painting is actually painted by Tony Tarashevitz, you see this negative relationship. So that negative relationship it means that the more typical a painting is, the faster people are to decide that it is painted by that guy. That's classification fluency. So, if typical stimuli are more fluent, that's one piece of the puzzle. And it also turns out that fluency is closely associated with liking. So I've written in this ironically hard to read font, people tend to dislike things when they are hard to perceive or understand compared to when they are relatively easy. So fluency is a really interesting variable. Actually, no one actually really knows why this is the case, that fluent things that are made fluent or that are fluent are judged more positively, but it's true. There are many studies with really interesting approaches, interesting phenomena. For example, my colleague I mentioned, Piotr Winkelmann, he showed that just simple manipulation of fluency by changing the contrast increases liking. People prefer the high contrast circle over the low contrast circle. I mentioned that already, that people don't like hard to read handwriting. They also don't like hard to understand handwriting. So there's a study by Oppenheimer where Oppenheimer presented participants with sentences that were supposedly for application for graduate school, right? And either simple or difficult, complex, disfluent sentences. So a simple sentence might be, psychology was a really valuable class because I discovered plenty of facts that accounted for what I was like when I was younger. So it's not going to win the Pulitzer Prize, but it's at least understandable, fairly simple, especially in comparison to the complex version, which is psychology was a genuinely beneficial educational opportunity, considering I unearthed a wealth of insight that elucidated my demeanor as a developmentally early stage. So what Oppenheimer found is that despite using all these big words and complex language, the writers who used these words were actually judged to be stupider than the people who used the simple language and were judged as less suitable for graduate school. In fact, these particular sentences I've got up here actually were created by my student Helen Owen, who's here today. And what Helen has shown actually is that not only are these, that she's replicated this effect, but also found that the simpler sentences are judged as more likely to be true. And if you hold statistically constant the perceived truth value of the sentences, the writers of those sentences are judged as more likely, more honest. And what she's doing for her PhD is trying to reverse this effect, so actually constraining people's language use, so forcing people to write in a simpler way, and asking whether that will influence their perceived honesty of their own self-perception of honesty, and whether they will actually behave in a more honest way when they're forced to use simpler language. So it's really interesting work, and actually if you want to hear her talk on it, you should, and in fact a lot of students from psychology will be speaking on Thursday, if I can just put a plug in. Thursday it's psycholoquy at the University College, so just check our website and you can come. Breakfast, I think there's a free breakfast involved. So my favorite study on fluency actually is this one by Song and Schwartz. I just have to mention this because Song and Schwartz asked people to judge how much they think they would like different amusement park rides. And the amusement park rides were randomly associated with either fluent names, sort of names that were sort of easy to perceive and pronounce, or disfluent names. And people judged the fluently named rides, like the Chunta, as probably more enjoyable and less likely to make them throw up than the same rides that when they were assigned to a disfluent, with a disfluent name, like the Vaiva Toishi. So coming back to our original question, a bit of a sideline here, but coming back to the original question, so we have found that stimuli that are closer to the central tendency of their category, that are more average, tend to be processed more easily. Things that are processed more easily tend to be liked more. And so we have a mechanism, potentially, for the beauty and averageness effect, which would be that when you get a blended face, the blended face is easier on the eyes, basically. It's easier to see. It's a more typical, more easily processed face that gives you some boost in positivity relative to the original faces. And it turns out that this is sort of true, but not entirely true. And the story is actually much more complex, and complex in a really interesting way, I think, because a morphed face, like anything, is an example of multiple categories. So Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Arnold Schwarzenegger is a great example of the category of action hero, or whatever, actor, I guess, action star. I guess he's not actually an action hero. But anyway, anyway, so Arnold Schwarzenegger is a great example of action hero. He's not so good of an example of the category of politician, right? Even though he is in that category. He is a member of the category of politician. I guess since his extramarital affair, he is a better example of a politician. Thank you. Anyway, so you would predict that it would be easier to recognize, to decide that Arnold Schwarzenegger was an action hero than you are to decide that he is a politician. And you'd predict that you'd judge him more positively when you think of him as a politician, as an action hero than as a politician. So in terms of the morphed faces here, although it is the case that the blended face is a good example of the category of faces, is actually not a very good example of either of the two faces that went into the morph. So the morphed face is both a good example and a poor example at the same time. And what we've shown is that by changing the implicit category structure, comparing sort of what group the faces seem to be an example of, you can reduce or even reverse this beauty and averageness effect. Now, this is not just some esoteric, well, it is an esoteric phenomenon, but it's not just an esoteric phenomenon related to faces, because there are real, genuine, natural, morphed people in the form of people who have multiple racial or other identities. And it turns out that biracial and multiracial individuals are very attractive. I know this sounds like almost borderline racist, but it's a certified true fact. That if you blend two faces from distinctly different racial groups in the laboratory, the resulting morph is more attractive than either the individual faces, but also more attractive than a morph of two same-race individuals. So it's not clear, again, why this is. A good hypothesis based on our work is that a blended face, a cross-race morph, is a particularly good example of the category of faces, the set of faces to which you've been exposed in your lifetime. But importantly, according to our reasoning here, this should only be true, so it should only be attractive as long as the individuals are not seen as member of their constituent racial groups. So in other words, Halle Berry is a beautiful woman, perhaps not so beautiful of an African-American woman. And we've actually shown, this is a paper coming out next month, in Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, that the appeal of racial blends reverses when they're seen as members of their constituent racial groups. You can do the same thing with gender. Justin Bieber, right? You can love him or hate him. Love him or hate him, Abby? Okay, the verdict is hate him, but whether you love him or hate him may depend on whether you see him as a human or literally as a human being or as a man, right? And I have to say, with the facial hair lacking, I'm not so keen on the latter category either. We created in the lab our own Justin Biebers, basically. We blended, we created morphs of male and female blends to 10 different degrees, and we asked people to rate the attractiveness of these morphs. Okay? And half of the participants, before they rated the attractiveness of the morphs, right, they were asked to categorize the individuals. So they had to say, just right before rating, they had to say, is this a male or a female? That's all. And then they rated how attractive the person was. And the control group also categorized the faces, but they did so, they categorized them on a gender irrelevant dimension. Okay, so in the control group, what you find is that a more or less linear preference for feminized faces. And this is actually a common finding in the face perception literature. All things being equal, people have a preference for feminized over masculinized features. But when people have to classify, you see this effect, but laid on top of that is this great nonlinearity, right? So people don't like the ambiguously gendered faces, but only when they have to classify the faces in terms of gender. And the dislike for these people is mediated by their fluency, by how difficult it is to categorize them. This is another study that Helen Owen is working on with me. The disfluency of multiply categorizable stimuli can also occur naturally if the competing categories are sufficiently salient. And that's why I believe that these are so-called anamorphs, right? That's why people don't find anamorphs especially attractive, right, or interesting. They find them a little bit weird and creepy, right? Which weird and creepy brings us back to to the guy from Hairspray. Right? The reason that I think that we find this a little bit disturbing is because we can see the original people in the morph, right? So it is hard to see the face as something, as a member of a higher level group, or as an example of the faces that you've encountered, because you're sort of pulled by your recognition of the individuals in the morph. You can't get rid of that automatic categorization. And you don't have to take my word for this, because we have a study, actually, that shows this, where we showed people blends of well-known celebrities, okay, 2 Kiwis, and the New Zealand participants found the face on the top to be especially weird and creepy, and they found the one on the bottom to be rather attractive. The only difference between, they're both morphs of famous celebrities, but the top one is a famous New Zealand celebrities, right? Blend of who's that? Suzanne Paul and Helen Clark. It was like the peak of my career this year was that they actually interviewed Suzanne Paul about this, about these images. And what did she say? She said, it gives me the heebie-jeebies, is what she said. I guess Helen Clark, no comment from Helen Clark. And the image on the bottom is also a morph of 2 famous celebrities, but they're famous in the Netherlands, right? It's Chantal Jansen and Brigitte Masland, right? So the interesting thing is that although the New Zealand participants show this pattern, we also ran the study in the Netherlands, right? And they show it's the best data ever. It showed the exactly reversed pattern, right? They think that the Jansen-Masland morph is really weird looking, and they find the Helen Clark morph is pretty attractive. In fact, they rate the middle one as more attractive, more appealing than either of the 2 individual faces. How am I doing on time? All right. I'll leave you with just one more set of studies. This is the most recent area we've gotten into in this sort of line of research with 2 of my master's students, Sam O'Sullivan and David Barton. It turns out that you can be a better or worse example of yourself, right? Or at least of your own name. And that's because people's names, well, names of things, contrary to popular belief, I guess, are not arbitrary. So people have a preference for certain names to represent at least certain shapes. So this is a study, this phenomenon's been known for a while, but this particular example comes from Ramachandran and Hubbard. So they ask people, here are 2 shapes, which one is, do you think, one of them is Booba, and one of them is Kiki. So which one do you think is Booba, and which one is Kiki? I won't wait for the answer, because I know what you're going to say, because almost everyone says the same thing. That most people believe that the rounded shape is Booba, and the spiky shape is more likely to be Kiki, right? So what Sam O'Sullivan discovered, though, is that you can repair these names, right? You can introduce people to a rounded shape whose name happens to be Kiki, right? And when you do that, people develop a dislike for that shape, right? Actually unconscious, it's an unconscious dislike. We actually use it's called an implicit attitude measure. And you can see that they associate negative things with that shape. They don't like things that have the wrong name. What David Barton extended this research to show is that individual people also have rounded and spiky heads, right? And just as with the shapes, you can introduce someone to a person named Bubba or Mickey. And if you introduce someone to a round-headed Mickey, they develop a dislike for the round-headed Mickey. It's not really clear at this point whether this is an actual fluency effect. So in other words, maybe people find it just a little bit difficult to process a person's face or remember a person's face or to learn a person's face when they have mismatching names, or whether there's something that's more closely related to synesthesia. It says something even more profound about our neural circuitry. But regardless of the cause, I should say David really has developed a method for quantifying this. So you can, for any individual one of you, we can measure how rounded your face is versus spiky your face is. And we can also measure how rounded or spiky your name is, and thereby create sort of a quotient, a rounded or matching quotient. And with that, then we can go do archival research. We can ask things like, is a person more likely to be trusted or to be elected or to be paroled if they have a mismatching versus a matching name? So that's just some interesting work that we're getting into now. I have to mention Sam had a Herculean effort in developing this paradigm, which took worked for probably 3 years on a 2-year master's, just developing these rounded and spiky shapes. Okay, so well, all right. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, are they going to have those little potato knish things at the reception? And I cannot tell you what you will taste at the reception, but I hope I've given you a taste of my own, just some of the many projects that we do and some of the stuff that we can accomplish with a brilliant set of graduate students and great support from a great university. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Jamin. My name is David Bilkey. I'm the current head of Department of Psychology. I think it's been very clear tonight that Jamin is running just a fantastic research program, and it's clear just how innovative and creative it is. Great ideas, and as a result of that, I think that's clearly paying off in terms of the number of students that you have in your lab. Now, of course, this is what you're seeing tonight as a result of a number of years of research, and that's resulted in many, many outcomes in the literature. For example, Jamin has over 50 journal articles in high-ranking journals, 14 book chapters, including 3 of those articles are in Psychological Science in the last 5 years, and Psychological Science is the premier journal in this area. And just very recently, Jamin has I'm not sure if he signed it, but he's certainly been offered a book deal with Bloomsbury Press to write a book about some of this work. So I think that's great. If you kind of look back over the last few years, I think the signs have always been there to indicate that Jamin's career, his research career, is on the rise. Back in 2007, Jamin won the Roheath and Carl Smith Medal, and that's a medal given in recognition of outstanding research performance in early career staff. He was made a Fellow of the Experimental Social Psychology in 2009 and a Fellow of the Association for Psychological Science in 2011. So certainly all the signs have been there for quite a long time. To be promoted to professor, you not only have to excel in research, but you also have to be a very good teacher, and you have to work very hard in your support for the university and your administration. But certainly in terms of teaching, Jamin teaches some very well-rated undergraduate and graduate courses. He has 6 PhDs that have completed, 14 MScs, 7 current PhDs and 5 current MScs. Jamin has been a 4-time finalist for the OUSA Supervisor of the Year Award. And in 2007, he was actually winner of that award. And I think, again, that's recognition of the outstanding effort in his teaching. Jamin has provided service to the university and community, particularly in the area of science communication. As he mentioned, he's done a number of very high-profile interviews on different media outlets. He's also been associate editor of Psychological Science, that's that prestigious journal, since 2012. But of course, above all that, the thing that I really think of when I think of Jamin is just he's been a great member of the department. He has an intellectual strength that really stands out, and an ability to see through into the core ideas that underlie themes and to get to the underpinnings of them. And I'm sure that's partly a result of his training in philosophy, and it's actually a nice way to see the way that the humanities and the sciences can work together there. As you would have seen from Jamin's work, and as Keith mentioned, it's very creative. And Jamin is actually a very creative guy. He comes from a creative family. Cindy is a very talented photographer. He has 2 very talented children. And that's obviously rubbed off. He's creative in many ways. He makes great bread. He plays the saxophone very well. And he just comes up with these really great experimental ideas. And as Keith mentioned, you know, one of the most recent ones is putting together the idea of working in the stadium with the fact, and one of the things that's special about the stadium is it's a covered stadium, which makes it very easy to put cameras up on the roof and actually to look down and see the way that people are moving. And so he's taken that fact and put it together with the fact that in Dunedin we have Animation Research Limited, who specialises in tracking objects and people. And he's taken those 2 things together and he's gone down to see ARL and to talk to them, and now he has this project going whereby groups of people go into the stadium and they're given particular tasks to do, and there's a camera overhead which is monitoring them, and they're able to be, or every individual is tracked individually, and so you can see the way that groups structure and coalesce and fall apart again. Now it's interesting, I noticed looking back through the journal articles that Jamin had written over the last few years, if you sort of look at the titles, some of the early ones were fairly straightforward and mundane perhaps, but in about the last 5 years, there's this development of creativity, and he's come up with some great ideas or great paper titles. For example, Death and Deities, When Good Blends Go Bad. Scaring the bejesus out of people. Oh, sorry, scaring the bejesus into people. And one that's so good that I think you could almost rap to it. Easy on the eyes or hard to categorize. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Wave your hands in the air and tell me that you care. There's some people you should just never give a microphone to. The other aspect over and above the creativity is also persistence. I mentioned the study with the stadium and working with ARL. Ian Taylor, who runs ARL, is not an easy man to get in touch with, because at any particular time he can be just anywhere in the world, Berlin, London, New York. And he travels a lot, and I know that it was actually quite difficult for Jamin to kind of keep up with that and to kind of keep on with this to make sure this happened, but he did that, and really it occurred over a period of about a year, but eventually it paid off. Also, as I think was mentioned earlier, I mean, Jamin had just won this great Marsden grant, but that required a lot of persistence. These grants are actually very difficult to get. There's only a low percentage each year of applicants actually get these awards, these grants. And but Jamin persisted over a number of years, and it's great to see that pay off. So Jamin, congratulations on your promotion, and congratulations for giving a wonderful talk tonight, and a talk I think that's made it very clear as to why you so richly deserve to be standing in front of us tonight. So I'd like you to join me in thanking him, and also on behalf of the university I'd like to offer the small gift in appreciation.